Jai Hind. It's a pleasure to be here on Brains Trust and speak about air operations on the Siachen Glacier. But what are my credentials to speak about that? I am Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur. I retired from the Air Force after about 4 decades of service. I am a helicopter pilot, and the biggest honor and privilege that I had was to be posted to 114 helicopter unit, which was in Jammu in 1978. And thereafter, to come back to head that unit as the commanding officer in 1994. 114 helicopter unit is known as the CHN Pioneers, and very few get the honor to serve in that. But more on the CHN Pioneers story as we go along. Later on in my service, I moved up, and in Air Headquarters, I was the Assistant Chief of Air Staff looking after transport and helicopter operations. Now that's the apex positioning to look after these 2 fleets. That was the pinnacle of my career. I will speak to you on air operations in Siachen, especially the rotary wing operations. Now, for those who are a little perplexed by this word rotary wing, you know, when an aircraft which we fly from place A to place B, it has got wings which are fixed. So they are known as fixed wing aircraft, while the helicopters whose rotors rotate, they are actually wings. And since they are rotating, it's known as rotary wing. So I will be speaking on rotary wing operations over Siachen. Now, both fixed wing and rotary wing are affected by atmospheric density. You require lift to fly, and that depends directly on rho. Now, for those with a little bit background of science, remember that's air density. And first and last time I'll use a formula: lift is equal to CL half rho V squared S. So lift is directly proportional to density. So as altitude increases, the lifting capability comes down because the density of air comes down. Of course, there are issues of temperature. As you go up, the temperature reduces, and that increases the density of air, and that's helpful to you. But that brings on additional problems or different problems which we'll dwell upon as we go along. Now, let's get back to the Siachen story. Siachen means wild rose. If you go into that valley, in summers, the Nubra Valley is full of bushes with pink and white flowers, beautiful flowers. You can't imagine that at that altitude and in that environment, there is this beauty that exists along the Nubra River. And I happened to see it many times. And here I am standing next to a rose bush, a Siachen bush. And what you see behind is the air traffic control vehicle. This is a photograph from 1994. I'm sure there is something else there now, but you have to control the air traffic as you go along. But let's talk about Siachen. So where is Siachen? Siachen, if you see on the map, is right up north. But as we have a closer look on the glacier, you realize that the history behind it starts actually from our independence. In 1947, when Pakistan was carved out of India, Pakistani raiders supported by the Pakistani army came into Jammu and Kashmir. And the story of how we saved Srinagar with the Indian Air Force airlifting the Sikh Allied troops just in time as the instrument of accession was signed, and saving Srinagar Valley is well known. Similar thing was happening along the ceasefire line, which actually got delineated in the Karachi agreement thereafter. But in the Karachi agreement, what it said was that the ceasefire line would go up to a place called NJ 9842. That was the grid reference. Because beyond that was all glacier, inhospitable place, and nobody ever thought that anybody could exist there or would exist or stay there. So the wordings were from NJ 9842 northwards up to the glaciers. That's been the root of the problem. Because what happened thereafter was that in somewhere around 1978, we came to know that Pakistan had been sponsoring mountaineering expedition on Siachen from the Bilafondla Pass and Siala Pass. And this came to our knowledge, actually it came to the knowledge of Colonel Narendra Kumar. He was known as Bull Kumar, when he got hold of a map, an American map from a German expedition, which showed the border beyond Siachen. That means Siachen being shown as part of Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Now that was dangerous. This matter was brought up to army headquarters, and this cartographic aggression was to be opposed. That was the decision taken. So, because the danger was that if that came to be acknowledged worldwide as being part of Pakistan, that would become a de facto border, and it would open up the Nubra Valley and thereafter the Shyok and all the areas north of Khardungla, which is actually a tourist spot north of Leh now. So they had to be stopped at Siachen. But first, we had to let the world know that that was our area. So in 1978, Colonel Kumar, who was the commandant of the High Altitude Warfare School, took an expedition up the Siachen Glacier. The aim was, of course, to show the flag. Officially, it was to climb Teram Kangri, a peak east of the glacier. That's where I came in 1978. Sheer chance, and life does throw up surprises, pleasant surprises, which you don't realize then, but you realize the importance later on in life. I did my helicopter conversion in the first half of 1978 and reached Jammu, where 114 helicopter unit was located, as a flying officer, and it was a dream come true, because as a kid, the 65 war and 71 war, the media, the press, the All India Radio News, all were full of names like Rajouri, Poonch, Cham, Palanwala, Jammu, Akhnur, and here I got posted to an op area, Jammu. I came there on in the month of June. I was the only flying officer in the unit. There were 10 squadron leaders and commanded by a squadron leader V.K. Dheer. Since I was the junior most, I obviously got various jobs to do, as it happens as a youngster, but then I was sent to Leh on detachment. Our unit from Jammu used to maintain one Chetak helicopter, an Alouette 3, detachment at Leh. And I found myself in Leh on the 25th of August, one of the most beautiful places on earth. People who have not been there are missing something. A desert at 10,000 feet, but wherever there is water, in the summers, the valleys are so green that you cannot imagine how green can be. And then there is the Pangong Lake, or Pangong Tso, which has been in the news because of the Chinese aggression lately. Shades of blue, turquoise blue, once again shades that you cannot imagine. So a place was out of the world which was there. Meanwhile, Colonel Kumar's expedition was ongoing on Siachen. In the month of August, on 23rd of August, that is just 2 days before I landed up there, the detachment there was Squadron Leader Sambyal and Squadron Leader A.S. Man. They got the first sortie to base camp. They flew that sortie to base camp, and thereafter I came on detachment on 25th. And from then till the beginning of October, we did around 5 trips. What were the trips? We would go to base camp, pick up fresh items like mutton, fruits, vegetables, because the expedition obviously had tinned stuff. We would go fly over camp 1, 2 and 3. These were the 3 camps we knew were established. The aircraft would be brought to a hover. The Chetak has 2 sliding doors. We would open the sliding door and kick out the sack on each of those places containing the fresh items, fresh food items. Go to the next camp, camp 3, and then come back. Now meanwhile, Squadron Sambyal went back and Squadron Leader Kaushik came on detachment as a detachment commander. He is known as Chacha Kaushik in the Air Force. So in one of these trips, we thought, why not pick up their letters for the people back home? Because there was no way letters could have been going back. So in this trip, one of those days when we went to Camp 1, we lowered a bag through the small window of the Chetak, like drawing water from a well, that sort. We lowered it, and in that we had written on a paper, "We are coming back in 10 minutes. Please write your letters and put it in that bag." And we pulled it up again, went to Camp 2, dropped Camp 3, dropped the fresh, and came back to Camp 1. Now that view is so clear in my mind even now, which is 42 years down the line. We lowered the bag, and once we raised it, there was inside no letters, but one carton of locular eye drops, 10%. I still remember that so clearly. And inside that was a piece of paper on which was written, "Saab, hamare paas likhne ke liye kagaz nahi hai, kagaz le aaye." Oh, it was such an emotional moment for both of us. I used to carry a school bag, a sling bag where we used to carry maps. But in that were also some free, the inlets that the Army Postal Service gives to people on field area. We dropped those letters, and thereafter we ensured that those guys sitting on the glacier were never short of writing material, and their letters reached back home thanks to drawing water from a well method. So that's the way Siachen operations started, air operations, in 1978. I finished my detachment on the 4th of October and went back to Jammu. But on 6th, I was sent back. We came back to Leh because an engine had to be changed. The aim was you take off in the morning, reach there by about 11:30, drop the engine and come back to Jammu the same evening. I still remember I had one apple in the morning. When we landed at Srinagar, in the Aircrew cafeteria, a dosa, that cafeteria could churn out dosas even in the thick of winters. And then we reached Leh at about 11:30. On landing there, while we were planning to come back, this casualty evacuation came up from a place called CHN Advanced Base Camp. Now, we had never been there, and I was the only person of the 4 pilots who were there who had been on the glacier. Squadron Leader Monga was the flight commander, and he was on detachment, and he took me along. So we took off in the Chetak with 500 liters of fuel. Why am I mentioning this? Because people who have flown helicopters, a Chetak, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, in Leh at about 11,000 feet, taking off is a feat by itself. And to cross Khardungla at 17,500, you had to take the help of thermals. We used to fly about 10 feet off the sunny side of the hills and catch the thermals to gain height. We had to do 2 chakkars minimum, and in case there was a downdraft, we had to be ready to kick the rudder, go into the valley, come back again, catch the thermal and cross again. So we did the mandatory 2 chakkars, crossed Khardungla and carried on over the glacier. Camp 1 came, Camp 2 came, 3 came, and we kept looking. I was on the map. We missed the turn towards Teram Kangri, and we carried on straight on the glacier. When I think back, we must have gone right up to Siala. We couldn't see the expedition. So fuel was running short, turbulence had increased. You don't fly in the hills beyond 12:30 other than for an emergency or a casualty evacuation. So we turned around, and as we were coming back, we saw the glacier at about 10 o'clock low. Squadron Leader Monga, who was the captain, he did a low pass, which is a standard operating procedure to check that the path is clear and there is nothing else. And then he made a fantastic landing at 15,500 feet with around 300 liters of fuel. He got down. I was on controls because we had no skis, because there was never a plan to land there on skis. So we held power so that the aircraft doesn't sink. 2 casualties were brought in. Squadron Leader Monga came back and then did one of the finest takeoffs I have ever seen in my service career, with 2 passengers, that is 2 casualties, and about 300 liters of fuel at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when the temperatures are high and you're talking of 15,500 feet. Unbeatable, absolutely. He was huffing and puffing because of when he had gone out, because of the oxygen. So he handed over controls and took on oxygen through the hookah. Now, what is this hookah? In those days, we didn't have masks. So it was the oxygen bottle with a pipe which we used to put in our mouth and take in oxygen. We used to call it the hookah. Now things have changed for the last 3 decades almost, and wonderful flying clothing is there. But that is how we started in 1978. And that landing gave the name CHN Pioneers to 114 helicopter unit. That's how it is known even today and will continue to be known. This is a copy of my logbook which shows the landing, shows that we went from Leh to advanced base camp to Thois for refueling and then back to Leh. So the story of operations, air operations, starts not in 1984, 13th of April, when Op Meghdoot was launched, but 6 years before in 1978. And the Indian Air Force was there right from the initiation of Siachen operations in 1978. Of course, it was there in a big way right when Op Meghdoot started in 1984. The glacier, what was it like in 78? Absolutely pristine, white, clear, because hardly anybody had walked over it. And this is a shot from Colonel Bull Kumar's expedition. What you see here is one of the expedition members sitting in the turn towards Teram Kangri, and far away is the famous Bila Fondla, over which Pakistan was sending its expeditions down glacier, which goes from the right to the left as you see it here. But this is 1978 Colonel Bull Kumar's expedition. So what's so special or unique about Siachen? Siachen is raw ruggedness, personified. It's beautiful, ethereal beauty. The lakes, the water that is there, they are so clear. Then there is the snout of the glacier. The snout of the glacier, when I saw it in 78, and now it has retreated because of global warming, basically, and it's retreated, to my understanding, a few hundred meters. It's black, thick moraine. You know, it carries rocks because the glacier moves every year a few centimeters. But the ruggedness or the menacing effect can be seen from this slide as you go and hit close to the snout. It's huge. And from below it starts the Nubra River. So what happens at Siachen? We maintain the army, the Indian Air Force maintains the army on the glacier through various means. But it all starts back from Chandigarh. In those days, AN-12s and packet aircraft used to fly and take the load to Leh. Nowadays, it's the C-17s, the IL-76 and the AN-32s who take bulk of the load, especially in winters when the roads are closed. They take it to Leh and to Thois. Thois is the airfield across Khardungla on the Shyok Valley and is as important as Leh is. Now from there, the loads are positioned to base camp and other advanced places either by road if they are connected or by Mi-17 helicopters. And Mi-17s do airdrops from base camp to lower altitude helipads. And when I say lower altitude, it's up to 16,000 feet. 16,000 feet is the lower altitude because above that is where the cheetahs come in. Now, of course, we have the Cheetal, which is the cheetah which has been re-engined with the Dhruv, a more powerful engine. So that's where the cheetahs come in. And they drop from the base camp to posts exactly over the border. The base camp is a beehive of activity. Mi-17s taking off, cheetahs arriving and taking off, loads being positioned. And there are certain peculiarities of those operations. First, as you would guess, lack of oxygen. Walking is a task by itself. You huff and puff. That's why there is an acclimatization schedule which is worked out for everybody who goes to Leh and beyond. The army troops, the army personnel go through various stages depending on what altitude they have to be positioned. They spend a few days at say 12,000, 15,000. There are figures that are altitudes that are laid down. For the Air Force pilots, once you reach Leh, you don't fly for a certain number of days as your body gets acclimatized, and then you commence some physical activity and start flying after some time. Not in our times in 1978. You came in the afternoon. By the time you reached from Jammu, we were told, go and sleep in the afternoon. At night, don't have your drink. And next day morning, we were up in the air and flying 7 hours a day. But now things are scientific and we have an acclimatization schedule. There is reduced air density, as I spoke about earlier. At Leh, it's roughly 1/4 that of sea level, reduced. And at 19,200 feet, it is half that of sea level. So that brings down the payload capability and also brings down the engine power. So the all-up weight that has to be calculated of the aircraft has to be precise to the last kilo, because that's the difference between a safe sortie and maybe not so safe sortie. So to give you an example, in the first shuttle that we do to a particular helipad, we carried only 1 jerry can of kerosene, 25 kgs. You can well imagine the cost of that 1 jerry can of fuel. But as you kept flying and the fuel kept reducing, the load carrying capability increased, but never ever more than 100 kgs or so. Then there are the weather peculiarities. Low clouds. Clouds come in without warning. And when you fly there, since everything is white below you, and if clouds come up and there is an overcast sky, you get what you call the ping pong effect, flying in a ping pong ball, where everything is white. And then it's difficult to get visual cues, to orientate yourself. You do not know, if you don't have a reference point, whether the aircraft is tilted, has got a bank on, or is pitched up, or is descending, because everything is so white. Yes, there are go and no-go weather criteria, and we never land up in a ping pong ball effect. But should you do so, it's a big problem, and you avoid that. Then there are the winds. Strong headwinds are always welcome for an approach and landing and takeoff. Takeoffs are always into wind. But beyond a certain point, at certain places, strong headwinds are not welcome. Why? Because there are helipads right on the border. On the other side is the adversary. So you make an approach from one direction into wind, and for takeoff you pick up, turn around and go. Now you are doing a tailwind takeoff. And beyond a certain amount of wind speed, that's dangerous. So winds, and then there is turbulence. As the temperature picks up, as the sun rises and comes up, turbulence sets in. So turbulence along with winds are a no-go beyond a certain point. Because of the reduced density, the control power, for the same amount of control movements you do, the response of the helicopter becomes sluggish because the density is low. So it has to be very precise flying, especially when you're sitting down on the helipad. The helipads are small, matchbox size, and the controlling that is required to sit down has to be very precise. Obstructions. They are not always unwelcome. Normally you don't want obstructions. But if there is something lying on the helipad, something around, it's good, because to the pilot it gives you a reference point. It breaks the monotony of white. So the moment you see something different, you can orientate and then you can control looking outside. You don't look inside close to the ground, obviously. So you cannot do anything on instruments as such. Then there are visual cues that are required, so vital. And since that is flying in an extraordinary environment, which doesn't exist anywhere else in the world actually, visual cues are so very important. So let's go and make an approach to a helipad. Follow me. You are my co-pilot. You're strapped up. We are at base camp. The aircraft is loaded in, and we have to go to a helipad called Zulu. We are at 11,500 feet. You take off and you climb and within no time you have to reach there because that helipad is not too far. So as you enter the narrow valley, you are climbing. The helipad is, you're climbing here, the helipad is beyond this hill that you see on the right side of the photograph. It is here, you can't see the helipad. As you come closer, it becomes a little clear, and the aircrew starts looking for that small piece of rock jutting out, which we call the finger, circled in that oval orange color. As you come closer, the finger becomes clearer. You have to be level with the finger as you near in, because as you turn around the hill, the helipad is right in front of you and you are making an approach. As you make an approach, your co-pilot is on the ball. You tell him to follow you on controls and call out power and your rate of descent. The pilot is riveted to the helipad. He senses where his seat is flying to the helipad. He's looking out. The co-pilot calls out the speed and rate of descent. And as you see the crevices that you see on this photograph, those are speed markers for you. The first crevice as you hit, it has to be 35 knots. Second crevice, fast walking pace. Last crevice, slow walking pace. And then you judder and reach the helipad. Anything faster or slower, you land up short of the helipad. We've had accidents where aircraft have landed up short. And to avoid the crevices, we had one accident where the aircraft actually went into a crevice. Luckily, the pilots were pulled out. And as you come onto the helipad, the sit down has to be precise. In the photograph, you see a marshaller saying, "Don't come ahead." There's a marshaller on the side who's saying, "Get down, get down." It has to be precise. You land, the load goes out, the new load comes in, which has to be taken back, or a passenger comes in. The aircraft picks up, turns around and goes. Your second aircraft is on finals, because in Siachen, you always fly in pair. Your buddy is on finals, you have to clear the helipad. Maximum 1 minute on the helipad. So that's how an approach is made. Now those helicopters that fly there, they have to be in top class condition, maintenance-wise and safety-wise. And the technical staff are doing a yeoman service. They are actually the unheralded heroes of CHN operations, the technical officers and the airmen who are there. You have to see the trends in unserviceability. They have to be closely monitored. The aircraft, the helicopter speaks to you actually through its unserviceabilities or indications it gives you in terms of vibrations, in terms of rattling sound, in terms of power that is not what it is being delivered. So the pilot has to be part of the aircraft as he flies there. And that's where he comes back and briefs the technical people who service the machines. And they have done an engine change at 19,000 feet. Unheard of. And this is the photograph of the helicopter which is there, which had landed there, and when it picked up, his engine failed, so it just sat down. So this aircraft had to be brought back, or the simplest thing to be done was push it off the ledge from the helipad. 5,000 feet down, it's a war wastage, no question asked. That's the simplest thing, because the helipad is so small, it has to be air maintained, that place, and that place has to be made for other helicopters. But no, this unit decided, this happened in 1990, the unit decided that it is a question of the izzat of the unit, because the unit felt, the CHN Pioneers felt that the helicopter can be recovered. So for perhaps the first time, an engine change was done at 19,000 feet. 2 airmen and 1 officer were acclimatized quickly, fast acclimatization given and positioned in the morning after a week on the helipad. The replacement engine came in, another helicopter. That helicopter, and the engine weighs 180 kgs, had to be made light. Remember, first shuttle, 1 jerry can of fuel. But now here was 180 kgs of load to be taken. So here was an engine that was to be brought, which was 180 kgs. So what was done? All extra panels were removed, equipment was removed, survival packs were removed from the helicopter. And after the engine was started up at base camp, even its battery was removed to make the aircraft light. And if this aircraft had an engine failure, he didn't have a battery to restart. But this risk had to be taken. This aircraft made an approach. When the noise was heard by the adversary, he started shelling. That used to happen because they would hear the noise and start doing air bursts. The shell would burst in the air and shrapnel would come down. So they landed, took out the engine, and in this time 20 liters of fuel was put in. The aircraft picked up and came back. Now our ground party was there with the engine, and they decided with the army, the Sikhalai regiment was there, that they would work at night so as to give no indication to the other side. So can you imagine? They worked at night. Temperature must have been around minus 25 in torchlights. They took out an engine physically because the crane that went there, mobile crane, broke because of the temperature. So they manhandled the engine out, put a new engine in, made all hydraulic, fuel, electrical connections, torquing of the bolts, made it flying worthy overnight, working. Next day morning, the engine started up, the aircraft was ready to fly, and it came back. That's the work that was done at 19,200 feet. Exceptional dedication by the ground crew that happens. And then there are practical solutions that need to be discovered for unique problems that arise. One unique problem is many a times the engine doesn't start at altitude for various reasons. One of them being, maybe oxygen is less because you require oxygen for combustion. The odd time we've had to open up an oxygen bottle of the pilot in the air intake, as you can see in the photograph, while the engine is being started up. So as you start the engine, you open oxygen into the engine starts. Unique solutions. Then there are special tasks that are done. Underslinging of snow scooters. The army troops have snow scooters there that need to be lifted out from base camp. So these are tasks that come on and off, and we undersling the snow scooter to the helipads that are required. The important part is these are routine day in and day out operations going on for the last 4 decades. Had they been the one-off sorties, then everybody is on the ball. Everybody is tuned up for something special. But this has become routine. That's the importance of carrying out safe operations day in and day out 4 decades. So who operates there? What's the quality of aircrew required to operate there? The selection of aircrew has to be very thorough, and that's done by the air headquarters. Normally we look for volunteers, and a background check of the flying capability is done by the Aircrew Examining Board and our inspection body, and then the officer is posted in. Once posted in, he goes through a CoPilot syllabus. No matter how experienced he has been in the planes, he mandatorily goes through a CoPilot syllabus before being checked out to carry out the captain syllabus. When I landed up there as the commanding officer in 1994, I didn't start flying because I was there I had done 4 years, 10 years earlier. I also went through a CoPilot syllabus so as to get back the experience. You cannot compress experience that comes by flying different times of the day, weather conditions, aircraft conditions, the way the ground crew operates, etc. So special clearances are also done for certain helipads, and then comes the glacier captain syllabus that you have to undergo before the supervisors clear you to fly as captain. This takes anywhere between 6 to 8 months. And once you get the glacier captain badge, that is something you treasure for your life. Few things that I learned flying over there. One, never fly on an empty stomach. Now, this might seem a very trivial thing, but it's so very important. Now, of course, the Air Force has the aircrew nourishment ensured through proper cafeterias, aircrew breakfasts that are available. In 1978, that first landing on the glacier, I remember having one apple, as I said, in Jammu, that dosa in Srinagar, and maybe a cup of coffee in Leh. That's it. That is all that I had taken in till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And once we took off from the glacier, I got what I later came to know was hypoglycemia, which was lack of blood sugar. Sweating, cold sweat, some churning feeling in the stomach. I couldn't understand what was happening to me. I just 23-year-old guy. I handed over controls to my co-pilot, Commodore Monga. I said, sir, I'm not feeling well. Now, he was a wizened old guy. He said, okay. He transmitted, get some food to the helipad. The food came at Thois helipad, and when I ate it, it was fine. That was one lesson learned for my life. No matter what was my takeoff time, I always had something in the stomach before getting airborne. Told that to my wife, and she cooperated, and she was always up before me. But that's a separate story. Now, the more important part, development of the sixth sense. All aircrew develop a sixth sense when flying there. When they are flying in the aircraft, they sense what the aircraft is telling them. They have to become one with the helicopter as it's flying, because it gives you an advance notice sort of a thing in case something is going to go wrong. And another lesson learned is you may be landing day in and day out at altitudes above 15,000 feet, but respect every mountain, irrespective of its elevation. Many people have come to grief thinking they were kingpins and they pranged at lower altitude helipads. Every mountain is different. Respect every mountain, every hill. So I talked about aircrew selection, which has to be deliberate. There has to be a psychological adaptation to one point. While you are gung-ho, we need to remember that in and day out operations, which are now actually routine, there is always another day to do the task. Don't do that. Carry on, press on to finish the task, even if the weather is clamping up or the aircraft is telling you that something is wrong. Other than if there's a medical evacuation where certain risks can be taken. We do not change standard operating procedures that have been worked down the years and have withstood the test of time. If you want to change something, be very, very sure that it is required, because all those guys before you knew as much as you know now. So we don't change SOPs, whims and fancies. Regular dual checks carried out by supervisors of the aircrew, and we come down heavily on people who violate standard operating procedures. When you're in austere area operation, hard area operations, we have to watch out for something called get-home-itis. You want to go and sleep in your own bed. So somehow finish the task and press on to reach home. In the hills, in the mountains, as elsewhere too, get-home-itis is bad. There is no task chasing. There is always another day to come back home. And we watch out for overconfidence. While a swagger is welcome in a pilot's gate, but let it not topple him. That is the obverse side of having too much of a swagger. And we train realistically to ensure that we have safe operations. And for people who are technically minded or on the research and development, what is the type of aircraft we require to fly there? If you're designing one aircraft, please design a helicopter that is light, that is small enough to go into those helipads, good look-down visibility, acceptable payloads at 19,000 feet in Indian reference atmosphere, good control power, good engine response, good engine governing. Your engine must be able to start after an overnight cold soak at 19,000 feet, on-condition maintenance, a high turnaround between overhauls. You give us this aircraft and we will give you the pilot. And if you can keep it cheap, that will be good. So, while operating there, everybody lands up in his tenure on somewhere when he has to take a decision. There is a decision dilemma that comes in. And factors affecting decision dilemmas, in my view, are two. One, where are you taking this decision in terms of space and time, a spatial factor? And the second one is, how much time do you have to react to that emergency or whatever that you are tackling? And it's born, the result is born out of experience, training, and individual aptitude. While all of us are there who are cleared to fly on the glacier, equally qualified, aptitude for a particular task is different from one individual to another. And that's where the importance of a clued up flying supervisor comes in. Because the end result sought or expected is safe operations, operationally acceptable to the organization. We've had accidents. Safety is paramount, but still accidents do happen. And we have lost a lot many Indian Army soldiers out there to enemy action, as also to weather, and as well the Air Force people. There have been accidents. There is a memorial at base camp, and it says, "Quartered in snow, silent to remain, when the bugle calls, they will rise and march again." That explains the spirit of all those people who are there, all those Indians who are there over the glacier. And some people criticize our holding the glacier. Stephen Cohen has written saying that Siachen conflict is like two bald men fighting over a comb. And I've written, but if the head is Indian, albeit bald, we still have a duty to protect it. That's what nation and nation building is all about. So as we go about doing the task, the CHN Pioneers 114 helicopter unit, the motto, we do the difficult as a routine, the impossible may take a bit longer. We try and live up to this motto. And as I end, have a look at this photograph. It's the hills above Thois. And if you see a flag, the national flag out there, you are seeing the flag because it is there. What happened is, it's not photoshopped. The pilot took the shot of the hill, and when he came back, he saw this image of the Indian flag there and realized it was the shoulder patch, the national flag, which was reflecting off the perspex. But it conveys that those hills are Indian, those hills are ours, and we will do whatever it takes to protect them. The Air Force's motto is, touch the sky with glory. Next time you go to Leh, as the aircraft is landing, look up left top. On the hill, the motto is written there on huge steel planks. On 8th of October, the Air Force Day, we climb up, the Air Force Station Leh climbs up and paints that white. The CHN Pioneers helicopter is there on top of the photograph, and we are got the motto, touch the sky with glory. These are the air operations that happen over CHN. These are the men and women now too who are operating over there. And we are there to support the Indian Jawan who is guarding those frontiers. The Indian Jawan is God's gift to our nation, and we will do everything to make sure that he is protected and he is safe and is supported so that he continues to guard the way he has been doing. Thank you. Jai Hind.